There's a simple joy to Super Monkey Ball 2. It's a game so simple that even my mom loves it, with no buttons, no camera control, just you, a joystick, and some levels. Monkey Ball is also a game of ridiculous depth despite that, with about a million micro decisions a second, with complex physics and momentum, and with increasingly devious levels full of gimmicks, obstacles, and suffering. It is quite often one of the hardest games ever made, but because every level is 60 seconds, and there's one 30-second level, and because you can restart in a second, it's much like its short burst precision counterparts like a Super Meat Boy or a Celeste. It's perhaps the most game-ass game ever made, and endless fun. Super Monkey Ball 2 was developed by Amusement Vision, a division of SEGA, and was directed by Toshihiro Nagoshi. If you're a giant weeb, you may know that name, as Amusement Visions would eventually morph into New Entertainment, and again into Ryu Ga Gotoku, the Yakuza guys. For his part, Nagoshi is an odd guy who once said that Puyo Puyo fans are the kind of people who eat their beef bowls with cheese. Fat nerds, basically. I kinda love him. Super Monkey Ball 2 is a follow-up to the original game, which was originally an arcade game but ported to Gamecube later, and likewise came out for the Gamecube but as an exclusive this time. Although it would eventually be ported to the Xbox and PS2 alongside its predecessor as Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, and eventually Deluxe itself would see a complete remake in Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, but I'll be back to that in a bit. Outside of minigames and menus, Super Monkey Ball 2 lacks any button inputs. Sure, the A button can be used to resize the minimap, which can be helpful for timing certain things, but it's not a button that affects the gameplay. The game itself is deceivingly simple. Tilt the stick, roll the monkey in a ball, reach the goal. And you do this in either the story mode, a series of 10 worlds with 10 levels each, or in challenge mode, a series of levels played back to back with limited lives and continues as a test of endurance. It starts out easy, with fairly basic levels that kinda just involves scooting about. However, as you start to get into the weeds, world 6 or 7 in the story, and shockingly fast in the challenge mode, the layers of this game's insanity peel back and reveal some frankly absurd depth. For one, you don't just control the monkey, you also control the stage. When you tilt forward, so does the stage. If you're falling and tilting, you're gonna rebound. If you're on a slope and leaning into it, you're actually flattening the slope out, and this oddly becomes a necessity as levels gain more and more complexity. Sometimes you can even move a stage beneath you to catch yourself. It's pretty insane. The impact of momentum in conjunction with this really can't be understated either. These monkeys are heavy. You better be bringing some speed into anything above a slight incline, and you better be counter-pulling on your way down, because if you don't, you're going to be feeling it. Small adjustments to regulate momentum are a necessity, and as you improve, you'll find yourself flicking every which way to get that perfect line. Diagonals are another hidden layer of depth. This game takes inputs in a square, something that I had vaguely intuited, but not exactly known until researching why I struggled so much in this game's remake. The corners of a square are farther away than its edges, therefore moving in diagonals against slopes or even shaking back and forth while you're trying to climb a slope gets you pretty far. You can carry a lot less momentum into a slope if you wiggle a bit at the top simply because diagonals are that much stronger. It's an odd quirk for sure, but it feels good to master. I intuited that wiggling was strong, but always assumed it was some kind of momentum thing, I don't know. Perhaps the game's one flaw is the camera. I think it largely works, it stays behind you at all times, and it's usually decent at that, and it being out of your control actually aids in consistency. But if you need to, say, back up to give yourself more room to gain speed, as getting up to speed takes a few seconds, you're gonna be wrangling that thing hard, and it gets even worse in certain situations. It struggles incredibly hard with cramped areas, and even more so when moving platforms get involved, which can leave you flying blind. And there's a handful of levels involving verticality, so not being able to look down can be pretty painful too, although I'd say it's only an issue in maybe like 15% of the stages, which isn't great, but was a pretty tolerable amount for the era. The point is, there's a ridiculous amount of depth hidden in Monkey Ball's simple facade. Of course, a game is nothing without levels, and Monkey Ball 2 has a mostly good track record, which is probably also about 85%, but that 15% isn't exclusively bad camera stages. Stages are split into what I would call precision and gimmick levels, and both these have solid selections. Precision levels tend to be more straightforward, with many of them being entirely based on their execution, although these often have the most fun jank too, letting you get wacky and beat them in unintended ways. It's not necessarily that they're full of rail-thin platforms, although they can be. Many involve timing movements on rotating platforms, dodging obstacles, and a lot of momentum management. Some of my favorites are Coaster, a very fun and fast momentum level, Downhill, a series of steep slopes that lead into giant rings, Triangle Holes, a web of thin rails surrounding triangle holes, obviously, that you can blaze through with speed and quick reactions, 8 Bracelets, which utilizes carrying momentum into a series of disconnected rings and traveling around them to reach the end, and its horizontal cousin Serial Rings, as well as Labyrinth, a stage that takes about 58 seconds to beat due to its winding layouts, although to be honest, many of these precision stages are good, with a few duds tending to be the ones that rely heavily on extremely precise slopes like Warp, which involves carefully balancing at the highest point of a slope near bumpers and maintaining speed at the same time, or things like Wavy Option, which uses incredibly thin platforms that are also sloped. Gimmick stages are decidedly more of a mixed bag, often featuring inconsistent and awkward gameplay, like the game's only 30-second stage, Melting Pot, which throws you into a moving box of giant rolling balls where you kinda just hope you get close enough to the goal to wiggle your way in. Switch Inferno, where you just click switches until you happen to find the one that doesn't kill you. Flock, an extremely tedious stage that involves waiting around on slowly moving platforms for them to allow you to hop to nearby ones when they're lower beneath you. Soft Cream, a stage where you balance on a sparring platform, which is a fun idea that functions badly as the camera's angle makes determining how close you are to its sloped edges and therefore death extremely difficult. And the worst level in the game, Launchers, where you use launchers to attempt to shoot yourself up on top of a tower. This is the most unreliable stage in the game, especially as the tower narrows as it goes up, leading to an almost inevitable point where you're airborne and attempting to land via the minimap, if you don't just get launched into the void in the first place. However, there are some relatively fun gimmick stages too, with stages like URL, which involves timing movement between a giant block that keeps moving in and out, Obstacle, a silly momentum-based one where you throw yourself off a tower to gain speed to go up another, and Jump Machine, which is what it sounds like, all being pretty fun diversions from the norm. I do have a preference for story mode. The lack of lives and ability to restart stages incredibly quickly allows you to go for silly and inconsistent strategies for the sake of going fast, while also making the more cruel stages a little bit more tolerable, and letting you memorize the extremely complicated movement in short, digestible bursts. Consistency is definitely not my strong suit. Plus, the silly cutscenes are a nice reward for pushing through the tough stuff. Challenge mode is definitely a mode for the extremely consistent, precise, patient, and skilled. Beginner consists of only 20 stages, the first 10 standard, and the second 10 being EX stages that are earned by not wasting continue, but even as you move up to advanced mode, you're staring down 40 stages on a handful of lives, 10 of those being EX, including some levels that are extremely difficult like Arthropod or inconsistent like Launchers. And I wish I could say more about expert mode, but I can't even reach it, let alone the new and unique stages tucked into the EX sections, those later modes. I have unlimited respect for people insane enough to push through this kind of stuff, but I don't know if I'll ever be good enough to do that. Super Monkey Ball 2 is an interesting if humble looking game. The monkeys themselves are very cute, Ai, Mimi, Gongon, and Baby, but they're not exceedingly expressive. You see them run from the back mostly, and if not, you're usually going so fast that they're stuck to the walls of the ball, a silly detail that makes going fast even more satisfying. There are 10 level themes, each distinct, but pretty samey as you tend to see the same one 10 times in a row, although I do love the creativity on display, especially when it comes to the washing machine and boiling pot themes, and the rustic feel of Clock Tower is pretty chill too. The game is very gameplay first as far as it goes. It has a uniquely artificial style that was common at the time, and I appreciate that style nostalgically, but the game certainly isn't a looker, even in the pre-rendered cutscenes, which do look a little bit better. Now sound, that's an entirely different story. The music, while not heavily themed, is perfectly arcadey and energetic, just what this game needed. But it goes even farther. The skids of the monkeys as they speed up and slide along the ground, their ooks and ahs and screams on Fallout, and of course the secret sauce, the announcer. He's so good.
Ready? Go!
His ready? Go is seared into my brain deep, as are his disappointed fallouts, and even the increasing intensity of his countdown as the timer gets low, which has the same effect on me as the sonic drowning music. He might just be the thing that ties the whole game together. I think he's maybe just the most perfect addition you could put in here. Super Monkey Ball 2 also has 12 party games, medium-sized mini-games of varying gameplay, quality, and as a bit of a shake-up, buttons. 6 of these are carried over from the first game with new features, maps as applicable, modes, and some refined mechanics, along with 6 new ones that can be purchased with play points that you get for, playing the game. Monkey Race 2 is probably the most natural party game for obvious reasons. It's a race in a game about going fast, although it's not as one-to-one with the main game as you'd expect, as acceleration is way up and momentum is carried far less, which is a bit lame, but a necessity to keep the pace of the races up, otherwise everyone would just be flying off all the time, especially because the courses in this mode are very winding. There are 6 courses in Monkey Race 2, and they can be raced as single races in a Grand Prix mode that includes all 6 tracks, or in time trials, which are solely single player and lack items. Speaking on items, there are 9, although many are functionally the same, with the bomb, polygon ball, ice cube, black hole, and missile applying slightly different effects on hits, but all functionally stopping or severely slowing an opponent, requiring them to stick jiggle to escape, which I think is a pretty fun and involved mechanic as a punishment for getting hit. While the boost is what it seems, the banana is a trap that slips up enemies if they pass over it, and big ball makes you huge, which not only shields you from certain attacks, but also gives you the very fun property of being able to push opponents around a lot easier. You're not quite looking at Mario Kart here, there's no drifting or other advanced mechanics, but the stages are decently varied, let you go fast, and the items are a fun mix-up for a small little side mode. Monkey Fight 2 is a boxing game. It's about as awkward as you'd imagine, as you punch with A or charge up punches with B to launch your opponents out of the ring to score points, or in survival mode to be the last man standing. And survival mode also causes the floor to collapse as time marches on, which is a fun little twist. While the mode is mostly awkward, with kinda clumsy aiming, a lot of chaos from the 4-player nature of it, and the small stages, the momentum-based nature of the game is fairly fun as you can steer yourself around mid-air to recover if launched high enough, and opponents pinball all over the place on strong punches, plus each stage offers a slight twist, like the toy box having walls that take damage and collapse away over time. While the range and strength increased power-ups are nothing special, the spinning punch power-up is pretty brilliant as it just adds to the nightmare chaos of the mode in a way that I kinda love. Despite some potentially fun moments though, Monkey Fight 2 is fairly forgettable and only offers a few minutes of fun between chaotic awkward moments that are a little too frequent. Monkey Target 2 is the simplest and shortest of the party game, and that actually gives it a lot of similarity to the main game. A nice short burst of fun. Roll down a big hill, go off a jump, open your ball into wings, and try to land yourself on targets. With a few variations on the targets, a set of simple ones that get smaller the farther away they are, but which have higher points as they go too, a long one that has its highest point totals at its far end, but you need to account for rolling to get to them, and a thin cross that rotates slowly, with its best scores likewise at its extremities. Power-ups can also be collected along the way, but doing so often pulls you away from the bananas and stars that are straight score increases, with the magnet causing you to drop straight down when you close your ball, and the brakes causing you to roll less. So there's some strategy mixed in too. The whole mode is short and sweet, and a fun distraction that doesn't fall too far from the monkey ball tree. Monkey Billiards 2 is what it says on the tin, a fairly basic pool simulator where you hit the ball with the ability to adjust the power and spin, and which can be played as single games or in tournament mode, and with several different rule sets. US 9-ball where you pocket balls in numerical order up to 9, Japan 9-ball, a schizophrenic game where everyone starts with 20 points and pocketing balls subtracts from the other player's points until only one still has some, with the 9-ball subtracting double when it's pocketed, Rotation, which plays like US 9-ball but with a weird scoring system, and 8-ball, which is the more standard pool we're used to nowadays, at least in America. One player knocks out stripes, one player knocks out solids, and eventually they fight to pocket the 8-ball. Monkey Billiards 2 is okay. It's not a terrible pool game, the aim lines might be a touch overpowered, the saloon theme and music are very cozy, but it does overstay its welcome a bit, with the games kinda tending to drag on. Also the AI is crazy good and will absolutely shark the hell out of you. You're never gonna believe this, but Monkey Bowling 2? It's bowling. Pretty standard 10-frame bowling. Although the controls are something, as you need to first try to select your aim by timing a fairly quick moving pendulum, select your power on a fairly quickly moving bar that rises and lowers, and dial in your spin, which seems to have little impact. It's kind of impressive how little it does, which kinda also means this whole thing overcomplicates bowling a little bit. It's certainly no Wii Sports bowling in terms of accessibility. Each character actually has slight variations here, where Ai is balanced, Mimi is slow but has the strongest spin, Baby's aiming reticle is slower in exchange for low speed and bad spin, and Gongon has the highest speed but almost no ability to adjust his spin. There's a few side modes, with challenge tasking you and knocking down specific pins like the 7-10 split, 9-pin where you bowl with 9 pins, and the most entertaining, the special mode, which has a variety of wackier lanes, like curvy ones, ones with hills, and ones with moving segments, which do spice up what is otherwise a fairly standard bowling affair. As with billiards, it's not really interesting enough for how long it tends to take, and the controls are something I've never quite managed to get used to, feeling clunky and imprecise at the best of times, so I tend to avoid it. Monkey Golf 2 is Golf, which actually is a switch up, as Monkey Golf 1 was Mini Golf. There's a full 18 holes, the first 9 of which are fairly normal and realistic, while the later 9 get way wackier and usually a bit unpleasant, as they sure do love hitting balls onto small floating islands. Like most golf games, there's a variety of clubs, although the game attempts to choose the most applicable for you, so outside of niche plays, it's a pretty tertiary system. You then select an angle and try to decide power and accuracy with timed button presses, which is surprisingly strict, but a fun layer to the game. I do think golf is the best of these sports, but like the others, it drags on and gets old near the final few holes, and the final few holes are extremely brutal. Plus the lack of an aim indicator on the minimap, as its remake would have, means it's incredibly difficult to judge distance, which feels like a bit of an oversight, as it makes the curvier and wackier stages extremely difficult to get through, especially since unlike the remake, you can stroke out by going above 10 points. The first all-new party game is Monkey Boats. The name itself is very funny, and it's another sort of racing game, although extremely different in execution, having you rafting through courses in a single race, Grand Prix or time attack again, and alternating between the L and R buttons to propel your monkey forward, and to steer. By paddling left, you go right, and vice versa. And like racing, it has a variety of items. Piranha torpedoes and whale bombs stun your enemies, the whirlpool temporarily slows opponents down in its radius, and the submarine is a really neat twist, as you can simply hold the L and R buttons to propel itself forward, as it's, not on paddles. The mode only has 3 courses, and only the final one is a substantial mix-up on the other 2, as it's a single lengthy river instead of a loop. I actually think the idea of Monkey Boat is kind of fun, and its novel control scheme is actually kind of neat, but I feel like it doesn't work too hot. Turning is incredibly finicky, as you tend to stay turned, and it feels incredibly difficult to balance yourself back out. Plus the game doesn't really make it entirely clear if it's a button masher or if there's a rhythm to it. It's the latter, but even so, it feels a little clumsy and tiring to deal with. Monkey Shot is my favorite of the party games. Maybe I just love rail shooters. I liked them in Rayman Raving Rabbids after all. The mode is an incredibly basic rail shooter. You point, shoot, and reload every 6 shots. If you run out of bullets entirely somehow, you need to mash to get back in the game, which will occur more frequently in multiplayer as you'll be splitting your scant ammo drops between each other. A few other power-ups also appear, with the rifle giving you an additional 12 shots before needing to reload, and the big reticle making aiming a bit easier, while the stopwatch pauses everything on screen briefly, a relief because Monkey Shot is pretty brutal, although scoring 10 hits in a row also gives you bananas to regain some lost health. There are 3 stages, which have surprisingly detailed designs and layouts, and each of which features its own array of matched and unique enemies, plus a boss, with the jungle level ending in a fight with a giant spider who needs to have his face and hair blown off, while shooting down his missiles, the underwater having an octopus that needs its limbs removed, and the space one having a lion. I'm not positive if I've ever actually fought the lion. The first level, Jungle Wars, is manageable alone, but even the underwater one quickly feels too much for one monkey, and the space level is sheer chaos when you actually manage to get to it. Monkey Shot is extremely fun. It's way too hard to be done solo, but the fact that it has 4-player co-op is pretty cool, and while it is a simple rail shooter, I can't help but have fun with it. Also, my mom loves this one too. Hi Mom. Monkey Dogfight was always my favorite as a kid. Don't know what I was on. It's a fairly simple dogfighting game. Hold A to shoot the machine gun, press B to fire a missile. The longer an enemy's in your sights, the more likely it is to hit. And you can adjust speed with L and R, with L slowing you down, which highly tightens your turn radius, and R speeding you up, which makes it much harder to make quick adjustments, but you're faster. And from there, you just shoot each other, either in a bid to score the most points or in survival mode to be the last man standing. There are 3 maps, with the Turtle Island stage being pretty basic, the mid-air battlefield having obstacles to hide behind, and Space Monkey Wars being the most cluttered by far and letting you very easily escape outside of the map, which is slightly overpowered and extremely silly. Dogfight is fine, it's a little too simple, but flying around has an inherent fun to it, I suppose. And now it's back to the sports. Oh joy. Monkey soccer is soccer. It's weirdly complicated, confusing, and clumsy, as control your monkey frequently swaps other members of your team as they're close to the ball, and with the controls shifting as you have or do not have the ball. A is tackle when you're without, but is used to shoot when you do have the ball, while B is pass, only while you have the ball obviously, Y lets you manually swap players, and L and R cycle between offensive, defensive, or balanced placements for your spare players. Also, the goalies, I don't think they work too good. They're incredibly easy to shoot past, and like billiards, the opponent will completely decimate you in this mode. The games thankfully are incredibly short. Even with the timer pausing constantly after goals and fouls, the 2-minute time limit goes by really fast. I don't like soccer. I don't think monkey soccer saves the sport. It's a bit too convoluted to be a fun minigame, while also being a brief flash in the pan. Speaking of going on for too long though, monkey baseball. Real life baseball drags on for ages, and monkey baseball might be even worse, as the game is shockingly slow. The batter hits the ball and hopes to aim it into one of the stronger run pits, as the ball doesn't actually fly, just rolls into pits in the back that let them run, or off of a home run ramp, while the pitcher can adjust the positions of their outfielders, aim the ball, and control its speed, even mid-roll, which is a kinda neat gimmick. But 10 innings is absolutely brutal to get through. The one twist it has is that before each half inning, the batter gets to spin the wheel, which readjusts the positioning of the pits and ramps and forces you to play a little differently, I guess, but not enough to keep this from being an absolute drag. Finally, there's monkey tennis, which can be played in singles or doubles. It's tennis. A is fast shots, B is slow shots, and the AI is really, really good. You hit the ball back and forth. I don't know. It's just tennis. Nobody cares about tennis. Super Monkey Ball 2 is the perfect distillation of gamey fun. It's so simple anyone can play it, and anyone can love it, yet so deceptively complex, difficult, and precise that only the most skilled can fully explore its depths. I consider myself decently good at the game, and there's stuff I can't even approach. There's such a freedom and a joy to the movement and momentum here, and it's a fantastic example of those extremely fun, short burst bits of gameplay that would become popular years later in games like Super Meat Boy. The story mode strikes the perfect balance of difficulty, but so punishmentless that anyone can do it if they try hard enough, while challenge mode is the ultimate test of a certain kind of person, and the party games are a nice cherry on top, even if only a handful are fantastic, and most of them fall in a sort of middling area. The main underline here is that Super Monkey Ball 2 is simple fun, a joy to play, and perhaps the perfect game in a lot of ways. For a long time, Monkey Ball was dead. Amusement Vision moved on to Yakuza shortly after too, and while some games still trickled out, they increasingly became more gimmicky and easier. Touch and Roll uses the DS touchscreen, Adventures, a mediocre 3D platformer by Traveler's Tales, the fucking Lego guys. Banana Blitz is a Wiimote tilt game, Step and Roll uses the Wii balance board, and after 2012's Banana Splits on the ill-fated Vita, it was over. That is, until 2019, Banana Blitz got a remaster. Okay. Then in 2021, we finally got Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, a ground-up remake of Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, more or less. But that being a compilation title means it's effectively like 45% a remake of Super Monkey Ball 2, with the leftover 10% being Deluxe original content. As its release date implies, it's on PC, Switch, Xbox One, and the series consoles, PS4 and PS5, so finally everyone can enjoy Super Monkey Ball 2 in a nice, convenient, and easy package. Also, for the time being, I'm only going to be talking about the Monkey Ball 2 portions of this game. Once I eventually do the first game, I'll make a video on the other half, and a shorty on Banana Mania as a package, as well as its bonus content. Banana Mania is, rightfully in my opinion, a fairly controversial remake in several spots, almost all relating to the core gameplay, which I think was changed mostly to make the game easier, but which inadvertently makes some stages much harder as well. For one, acceleration is way up, as is stopping. Hell, momentum is basically non-existent. You no longer feel like a ball being nudged around by a tilting stage, you feel like a dude, running, but slightly slipperier. While the controls are certainly more intuitive for typical games, I feel it loses that chaos that made Monkey Ball so fun, and a lot of the more interesting tricks are killed outright by these changes. Some stuff is definitely easier, especially narrow rails, but even then, the game doesn't feel as good as the classic versions. Stage tilting is also significantly slower, which can occasionally feel sluggish on stages that ask you to go back and forth a lot, and perhaps the most damning is the inversion of the strong points on the controller. The game's inputs are now taken in a circle, but given a boost on straights, especially dead ahead, which means going forward is the best way to move fast, and moving perpendicular to slopes in a stage like Warp is significantly more difficult than it already was, although many other stages are significantly easier in turn. There's also the camera, now fully controllable. There's a ton of good here, and a lot of levels that were pretty bad because the camera hated cooperating, like Spiral Bridge, are made significantly more tolerable, and in general I do think it's a plus, but it does come with two major drawbacks. One is a little less obvious. Given that the movement is strongest when going forward, your best bet is to always be adjusting the camera to move and change direction, and this makes the game substantially more complicated in a way that I think would probably filter my mom entirely, especially since the camera, while still moving on its own, is substantially less tight and reliable than it once was. It's a little finickier and loves to move with every little movement you make. The other is, maybe this is a me problem honestly, but playing on the Switch with several different controllers, including a Gamecube Pro controller that has upward notches, I noticed that when you begin moving at the start of a level, even while holding up before it starts, the way the camera centers itself at the beginning offsets you incredibly subtly to the left, and this also sometimes occurs when attempting to line yourself up with things, which caused me endless grief on sieves. But also, starting holding up is good on a lot of levels, so having to fiddle about to correct it got frustrating a lot. It's not that the game is bad, not at all really. I think it's largely a good remake, but there's these little odds and ends, especially as a seasoned Monkey Ball player, that frustrate me. If you were to enter Banana Mania blind as your first game, I'm sure you'd love the hell out of it because Monkey Ball is fun, but I can't help but long for Monkey Ball 2 when I'm playing it. The sauce is gone, it's not that freeing, crazy, difficult game it once was. It's a little more basic, a little too easy usually, and its quirks frustrate me more than they smooth the game out very often. I suppose I should also mention the helper function, a new and kinda unique easy mode that the game pesters you to turn on way too often for a game about quick bursts and a lot of failures. It doubles the time you have to beat a stage, shows you a path that aids you in taking the most optimal path through the level, which is kinda cool for practicing hard tricks, and lets you slow down the game, which for a tight momentum focused game is very broken, but it's a nice accessibility option. I don't use it, but it's a relatively cool way to make an easy mode for a game like this, I suppose. Both story mode and challenge mode also return, but challenge mode has a bit of a twist. It ditches the live system and is instead solely an endurance challenge, which is much more my speed. I got to the advanced mode EX stages for the first time, and then I tried to start the stage over because I had wasted a bunch of time checking my phone, and it sent me packing back to the start. But I still got to see a few new stages I had never seen before, and I plan to return and grind through eventually. It's a good change, I think. Every party game from Super Monkey Ball 2 returns, and most are pretty much the same as they were. Monkey Shot is still the best one. The games that had existed in Monkey Ball 1 and 2, Race, Fight, Target, Billiards, Bowling, and Golf, are technically remakes of both versions, as in Race has 12 courses, as it includes both the tracks from 1 and 2, and so on. The mini golfing from 1 actually fits the game way better, by the way. In general, this is a straight improvement. I like Monkey Race, so more Monkey Race is good, but some games have more significant changes. I'll be pretty brief here, but perhaps the game that's the most changed is Monkey Fight, which is now entirely top-down and is much slower paced and less chaotic. You also lose all air control. It's kinda lost everything that kind of made it interesting, unfortunately. Monkey Target also feels very weird. Without the momentum of the original game where the best strategy was to open right after the jump and coast on that delicious speed, it's a much more awkward game where you launch, then the game cheats to send you way up, and you kind of float down from there. It's just not as satisfying to do, despite some additional targets to land on. Monkey Billiards hasn't changed in gameplay, but I miss the saloon theming and music. It was just comfier. Monkey Boat is basically entirely overhauled. The controls this time just work. The boat straightens itself out better, moving forward feels snappier. It's the game that has gone from the weirdest and least comprehensible to a pretty decent if gimmicky racing game. Lastly, Monkey Soccer is also touched up quite a bit. Characters don't switch as often, it's a bit less cluttered, but ultimately it's also still a soccer game, which means I can't bring myself to care that much. For the most part, Banana Mania looks good. The monkeys use newer designs, more in line with the style of the middle era of games, and they're very cute. I can't hate. The menus are slick as hell. I love the outlines of the characters over moving backgrounds, and the dioramas used to show each mode are very adorable, and each level theme is really well recreated. The lighting is a bit too bright, if I'm gonna nitpick. The original got a little darker and moodier, with areas like Volcano and Clock Tower being fairly dark, where this game is definitely a bit flatter with the lighting, although not in a terrible way, just a little bit less interesting. What really hurts this game is the sound though. Gone are the skids and scrapes at high speeds, replaced only with the simple bloop every rotation of the ball. The ding of the timer is also gone, which was really useful for timing out actions on certain stages, and the monkeys are quieter in general. The bonus characters, Beat from Jet Set Radio, Kiryu from Yakuza, and Sonic and Tails from Sonic, are dead silent, and that's a shame because they're very adorable models. And they even get unique bananas, like Sonic and Tails collecting rings instead, which is super cute. The music remixes are hit and miss. Some are really good, others are a little worse. They're largely fine, but I have a lot of nostalgia for the original stuff, as you can imagine. The most painful loss, though, is the announcer, replaced with a woman for the main game who fills the role well, but definitely doesn't have the same energy, and a different guy in party games who I do not like at all. He's just not it. And it kills some of the energy that the original announcer brought to pretty much every corner of the game. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania is a good game. It's a hell of a package that extends way past just being a Super Monkey Ball 2 remake, but I'm also disappointed. Despite being a solid marble game, it's no Monkey Ball 2. It feels wrong. As your first Monkey Ball experience, I imagine it's end-to-end fantastic, but for someone who's been playing this game for ages as I have, it's a fun game, but certainly no replacement for the golden standard that is Super Monkey Ball 2 itself. Keep in mind though, this is a review only of the Monkey Ball 2 elements. Banana Mania has a lot more to see, and removed from the context, I find the game quite fun, and its bonuses to be pretty great, but it simply isn't Monkey Ball 2, but I guess nothing really is, huh?